Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohel Hasni. I've been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast. Okay, Silver, you have been sort of the solar person in the Philippines for a very long time, very
Yeah.
long time. And I think when I started, we discussed doing solar in the Philippines many years back, and I mean, of course, I understood, knew the um, basic engineering side of it, but not the details at the time. But yeah, then I caught up. So, what's your view of the world? Where are we headed in solar?
I think it's quite exciting because the technology is advancing and policies had been clearer. It created new opportunities business wise,
Mhm.
and the awareness is also increasing not only for how solar works, but also how effective it can be, both on grid and off grid.
Mhm.
And a lot of players are coming into the market. Yeah.
Well, but that has been going on for quite some time, no? But Philippines somehow has missed the boat, someone might say, no, for rooftop solar especially, because I look outside the window, still I see now only one solar. This is all of Makati I look at.
Yeah, so probably they took another boat. They missed the big one. Yeah.
Because Philippines has one of the best RE law, right? The renewable
Well,
energy.
it's a mix of everything that they can put into a law. Yeah. So we had the feed-in tariff, we had the RPS, we even had the auction for it. So the green markets, and also um, it's a mix of what we can get from outside, but of course, even the implementation of this law also evolved. So those who had changed the law, like in Germany, they have modified net feed-in tariff. Then we have also to adjust. So we're also following the problems they encountered.
Before we get into all those details, maybe you can also introduce yourself, saying how long have you been solar, what you have been doing, no?
Yeah, I've been doing solar since 1990. So that was when solar was still expensive. We had a big storm that happened here, and it took more than a month before our power came back. But so I have to find ways of getting electricity. So I got interested in the technology, and we call it then alternative energy. So that includes solar, PV, wind, hydro, and so we also got trainings from Germany and also from around Asia, like Thailand, regarding the technology. So I started as a solar engineer. Then I'm doing projects mostly off grid at the time, and then now because we're the big breakthrough with the solar rooftop at ADB, we literally created that awareness and market. So uh, I'm more doing more on consulting work for providing financing for larger solar projects, and also providing advisory for technical design and market approach for solar projects.
So since 1990s, world is a very different place, right?
Yeah, you can say that.
Because solar per watt used to be $7 something in 70s, which
Yeah,
is
it
now
will be
almost,
10 in some cases. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and now it's about almost nothing, $20, 23 cents watt peak, right? If you
yeah.
take
Uh,
Alibaba, right?
with yeah large volume, yeah, it can go that cheap. Yes.
So why is not solar everywhere in the Philippines? If you somebody asks you that question.
Uh, There are several things that makes it so. Uh, I've always encountered this when I talk with the utilities that they're threatened when people install solar because they felt that their market is small, getting small,
Mhm.
and utility distribution utilities buy their energy from the energy supplier as a structure of our energy market, and they cannot sell all of that, so they felt that they're buying more than what they uh, plan to sell, especially when the large industrial or commercial installations install solar. So they felt that the market, the electricity market is getting smaller. So they have a cold shoulder in allowing solar to enter the market. And also, there's a lot of regulation that you need to pass for you to install solar. And price is not really that cheap. It's still significant if you want to install solar at home, so or even the offices. So there are still challenges in installing solar in the Philippines.
Well, there must be, of course, challenges there, and that's why it's not happening. But there are not no regulatory barriers, right? You will not get feed-in tariff unless you are 400 kilowatt or something, right? So that was one distortion in the market globally. In every country, domestic customers got subsidies, but in the Philippines, no, right? That's one distortion I can think of, no?
Yeah, and whenever uh, foreigners would come to the Philippines talking about feed-in tariff, I would say the Philippines has a different definition of feed-in tariff. It's primarily focused on large
Mhm.
installations, and we already fully subscribed the quota for feed-in tariff. So that option of the renewable and low is not there anymore. So we're looking now into net metering or RPS as the next options.
Well, I mean, feed-in tariff is not needed anymore, like globally. I don't think any countries have feed-in tariff. Auctions have killed feed-in tariff. Uh, I remember discussing with Secretary Reyes and then Secretary Almendras many years ago that if
Yeah,
everybody offers you that much, what you're going to do ultimately, you have to do some auctioning, right? Because there will be too much demand. But anyway, feed-in tariff is an old discussion. But still, the point remains: Philippines has one of the most expensive electricity, as we all know, in Asia, other than Japan, right? That fact has not changed. And
yeah,
labor is relatively cheap. That factor has not changed. To install a
yes.
solar, I mean, you are our MacGyver, you know it all, right? It does, it's no rocket science. So why is not every household in rural areas have solar?
But
They don't
still,
need a feed-in tariff. They just need a maybe few 100-watt system on rooftop, no?
yeah, that's true. We have a high cost of electricity, but I guess installing a system is not that uh, cheap yet, or financing is not readily available. So, I mean, when you say electricity is cheap, that's spread over time, capital cost spread over time. So PV system, if capital cost is still high because you have to put money up front, it's still a challenge, and financing is not readily available. Although there are contracts for commercial installation that no upfront cost, but you pay the system over time. So I think that's one business model that had been thriving so far. But for the smaller systems on rooftops, there's not like a very attractive model yet. That's quite affordable and easily accessible for regular households. Yeah.
I mean, we had this same discussion uh, many years ago when we worked together applying for the Clean Technology Fund, remember?
Yes.
We calculated some rooftop solar market in the Philippines. I think you calculated 400 plus megawatt just in Metro Manila, right?
Yeah.
Something
So
like
right now it's 28 megawatts, I think, that had been registered for net metering. But that's only scratching the surface.
yeah, but a net metering doesn't give you much. In the Philippines also, it's literally net meter, right? And with the time of use, right? You don't get the same price, right?
Oh yes. So it's designed again policy wise. The how we designed net metering was just to displace your daytime use, and it's not really something that you invest in and recover your money. It's just the savings that you have. So for offices that don't use electricity during weekends and holidays, that's their option of not wasting their generated electricity. But with the COVID and work from home situation right now, the household demand actually increased, and solar has like become more viable, more attractive because of the demand in the domestic applications.
So what's the total installed megawatt now, right now, roughly?
In terms of households, or
Yeah, in terms of households.
uh, because Metro Manila had around 28 megawatts, I would say for the rest of the Philippines, it could be maybe 40 megawatts. So because Metro Manila takes around 60% of the total consumption. So just my rough estimate of installations. Although there are big installations now, this is not intended for net metering because we limited the capacity of net metering installation only up to 100 kilowatts. So commercial installations beyond that cannot sell their excess electricity, but they use it internally. So it could be hundreds of megawatts for non-net metering. They call it own use applications. So you can like SM mega or malls or Robinson malls that have several kilowatts to a few megawatts of solar actually
Mhm.
use it internally, and they don't sell it, they don't apply for net metering. So it's merely displacing their daytime use, and they use it anyway every day. So uh, that's a big in fact opportunity for solar for daytime use, especially for air conditioning.
Mhm. So you are not setting up a company yet to take that on, really.
Um, I'm taking an objective way because I'm doing consulting for the banks that finance them, so I have to be objective,
Okay.
and I have to be fair with the rest of the players in the market. So that's a stand I have to take. Yeah,
You are saying that the banks are financing only large project and
not
residential.
necessarily. They don't want. They also want to go retail, like swipe your credit card or so, because it's also like the bank I'm working with also have their own environmental and sustainable goals. And
Mhm.
one way of doing it is providing access to finance for regular customers to do renewable energy or energy efficiency. So using your cards or personal loan to access these technologies can be a way of providing that access to clean energy.
Okay, okay, that's good. Will Are they financing also off-grid systems if you have limitations on net metering, meaning you need to have a certain size? So is any of these banks financing off-grid systems?
So far, we have financed off-grid system in large scale. These are hybrid systems. So we're talking about megawatt off-grid for utility scale in combination with diesel. So because the bank still needs to understand how to get the money back, and it also needs to have that mechanism. So the bank cannot do the business itself, but finance businesses that covers those off-grid areas. So you can be a utility, a third party providing off-grid systems, And the banks will be requiring you to show your business model, even your legal, uh, uh, let's say, perspective in terms of providing that service, because off grid actually belongs to the electric cooperatives,
Mhm.
and you're competing also with SPAG, the National Power Corporation, small power group in charge for off grid. So they're providing free, sometimes heavily subsidized off grid systems that no private company can compete with. So it's sometimes risky, but you need to have that legal framework to take advantage of the off grid systems. And if you can avail of the subsidy more efficiently, then you can also be a provider for solar in off grid areas.
But there remains a question like these off-grid areas who rely on diesel, which is 40 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe 50 cents a kilowatt hour in some cases, no? If it's a remote areas in an island. In those circumstances, solar at any place will not cost you more than 15 cents a kilowatt hour, I would say, no?
Well, 15 cents
Very high, I would say,
during
no?
daytime, of course,
Yeah, no, no,
without the batteries.
I'm talking about daytime. Yeah,
Yeah,
without the
yeah,
batteries. The batteries is another 15, 20 cents a kilowatt hour, or maybe even more. The prices
could
that,
be more. Yeah.
yeah. So if it is daytime only, so there is a market for all electric cooperatives everywhere, just daytime, no? If you are residential customers.
Yeah. Unfortunately, off grid doesn't only work on daytime. It
Mhm.
needs energy storage. So it's a challenge. That's why it can compete with diesel. Uh, Solar plus battery can be competitive against diesel, but it also uh, capital intensive if you want to compete with the scale that diesel can provide. So we're talking about refrigeration and even larger loads. So it's a substantial PV system that needed to displace diesel. So hybrid systems could also work in tandem with diesel. And I think it successfully worked in off-grid areas, particularly the resorts,
Mhm.
because they're used to diesel and they have high demand for refrigeration, cold storage also for the guests. But I guess right now it's quite down because of the pandemic, so we have limited guests coming in. So it's tourism is one of the more successful users of off-grid solar PV systems.
What do you suggest? I hear from you there are a lot of pockets of opportunities
Yes,
and
yes.
a lot of money is needed to explore those areas. Banks not fully understanding all of those because they are not in a position to operate the businesses. So they want someone else to do it. And if they're credible, they will finance.
That's correct. That's correct, Soil. Yes.
So what opportunities you see for young entrepreneurs to get into that space or what you tell them?
Oh, that's. I mean, there's a lot of business models you can create now, and especially the IT related ones, especially the if you have controls or payment mechanisms using online payment also. You can see the tree in my background. That's in a site where we have a solar powered decorticating machine for pineapple leaves. So instead of using diesel, they're using solar power to run this machine and create fibers from pineapple leaves to as an extra income because these are used for as vegan leather. It's actually the market that's already existing that you can look into the opportunities where solar or renewable energy can fill in. And probably these entrepreneurs or startup can identify that. It's just that they need to know what the technology can provide and what business opportunities are there. Of course, we have also to understand the legal policies and regulation that will allow you to legally work around that. As I mentioned earlier, it's difficult to compete with the utilities, but in off-grid areas, there's a lot of opportunities, uh, displacing diesel operation. So the utilities cannot compete with you in those areas. So those are the opportunities, particularly productive uses like cold storage, post harvest processing, and several other opportunities in off-grid areas.
But broadly, do you see any opportunities for people to move into rooftop solar, almost like operating as an ESCO model?
I'm projecting that that will happen, especially now that we're implementing the JOP. So this is the green energy option.
Mhm,
Means if I'm a 100 kilowatt user, I have the option to buy directly from an energy supplier.
mhm.
So because we have an earlier law, the EPIRA, that's the restructuring of the energy sector, that split the transmission, generation, and distribution. Now, under still EPIRA, you have the retail electricity suppliers that can provide you electricity if your demand is high, if you're a contestable market, like 500 kilowatt or so demand. But with the renewable energy, 100 kilowatt users can avail of green energy provider. So somebody can install solar rooftop on my roof, and I can legally buy that energy. And if I have a big warehouse, I can put a lot of solar rooftop on my area and literally sell that to another end user through that JOP mechanism. So it provides a way of building those business models legally, taking advantage of the wide roof areas, and it's a voluntary market anyway. So as awareness increases for clean energy and also competitively cheaper energy from solar during daytime, it's the supplier and the market playing, not the utilities anymore. So I would say that's a policy that allowed business model to come in, and I see that as the next big thing in the solar rooftop area.
But still, again, these are for relatively large customers we're talking about, no?
That's because of the 100 kilowatt, again, the 100 kilowatt cap. So, but for retail, like a few kilowatts per house, I think that's already happening, except that it's not too many players entering that market.
What's the so I heard regulation so many times, right? When you
Okay.
mention solar. Now, if somebody, entrepreneur, wants to set up a solar company targeting a rooftop, what legal requirement other than a normal business registration they have to do?
Well, it's an electrical installation, so they have to have a licensed engineer to design and supervise the installation.
Mhm.
And in fact, the plans has to be assigned and sealed by a professional engineer. So I would say those are only the legals, primarily for safety purposes. And of course, the processing of the permit, primarily you're talking with the office of the building officer that in charge for the electrical permits. And for the connection with the utility, it's the utility that will allow or certify that your system is safe. So primarily, this only two agencies you have to deal with.
And typically, how much time it takes to get the utility to agree?
Uh, that that depends on which utility. We're talking about for Beco that's in Cebu. I think they're the fastest to respond. So within the week, you can get
Within a
a
week?
permit. Yes, because they valued, they understood the advantage of the solar in their system. Talking about Meralco, the largest utility, it could take months. So it's a very big contrast. So depends on where you are with which utility you're working with. It takes time. Yeah, and also with the office of the building officer or the engineering division of the local government unit, it also takes time, particularly now that you have to queue online for your appointment for inspection. So it takes a while. So that's also another challenge now.
When you say while, how many months?
Uh, it could be in several weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Worst case is 6 months. So uh, because of the queues are piling up, and recently you have changes in travel restrictions. So suddenly technicians cannot go out or blocked off from the area. But that's also one effort we're doing with the Association of Electrical Engineers to um, to streamline the permitting process, particularly simplifying the checklist of compliance to the safety requirement. So it's not really that big deal, particularly for pre-designed configurations. If they done that before, it should be okay. So that's to facilitate a faster approvals. Yeah.
So it would be ideal if somebody can come with a modular system, so you can just
Yes.
plonk it.
So that's right. That's correct. So if 5 kilowatt is just two sets of 2.5 kilowatt system, and that's okay. So as long as everything is in place, or like one housing project have similar installations throughout its units, that's already pre-approved. So you can get one blanket approval for similar projects within that one locality. So just is to streamline the approval process.
Okay, that's very good. So looks like the things are finally slowly happening in the Philippines in terms of rooftop solar, no?
Yes. So utilities has to catch up because there's demand from the customers, and also players in industry also stepping up their efforts to meet that demand.
So roughly, if somebody finds a retailer to install rooftop solar or have access to a bank, what's the cent per kilowatt hour prices are we looking at now, levelized cost, roughly?
Uh, I can only talk about pesos. So
Mhm.
installations, I think about more than 100 kilowatt could be as cheap as uh, 45,000 pesos. That's less than $1,000 per kilowatt.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's already installed.
Without
So, but
battery.
without batteries. With batteries, the price could double. Yeah, but
Yeah.
already with lithium batteries.
So if you say 45,000 pesos, just under $1,000, how much that translate into peso per kilowatt hour equivalent?
Uh, it depends on your
Mhm, of course.
uh, the time frame you're going to divide the generation of that system over time. Since I'm working with the bank, we're looking at providing a 10-year loan. So usually the payback comes around maybe on the sixth or seventh year. So that's the roughly the um, and even if sometimes depending on the cost and also the cost of electricity they're competing with, it can be as soon as like 5 years.
Yeah, no, I didn't get my answer though, but I'm
Yeah.
saying that,
So
yeah.
okay, if Meralco is selling electricity at let's say for residential, that's 12 pesos. That's roughly how many? 40, 30 cents,
Mhm.
20. Yeah, around
24
let's
cents a
say
kilowatt hour, say 24 cents, yeah.
okay, 24 cents. So uh, if you're competing with 24 cent electricity cost, you're going to recover that, let's say, in 6 years. If you're estimating that the system would last maybe twice that much, then the price could go down half of that price. So if you're looking at what will be the equivalent cost per kilowatt, will be half of what they're selling in the grid right now. So maybe around maybe 20 or 15. So
Yeah.
that's a
So it has
one way
that's a
of
very steady.
also calculating. We're talking about just a 12, 15-year time frame. Yeah.
So if it's a 12 cents a kilowatt
Yeah. So
hour,
if you,
enough,
yeah, it can be uh that cheap now. Yeah.
because that's quite significant, right? Especially for new installations.
Yes. So we're talking about new types of solar modules that like the half cut cells. So with a higher efficiency and lower cost per watt peak, and also inverters that are more efficient and uh, also more reliable. So um, electricity can be cheap. We're talking about systems without batteries yet.
So good.
So, but people don't see that uh, pesos per kilowatt. They're looking at how much will it cost me to spend upfront. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if ESCOs can convert that peso per kilowatt into something competitive than Meralco or any utilities, then that could be a more attractive understanding of what solar can actually provide. Yeah.
I saw a lot of advertisements that we will give you solar, install similar to the ADB model, and then we'll provide you half the cost of your current running cost. So is that those schemes are not taking up?
Um, Often they require probably a minimum of 100 kilowatt installation capacity. So for smaller ones, your overheads can be high. So it it only makes sense if you have like 100 kilowatt system or so. Um, so those schemes are actually happening. Yeah.
How much of that will happen, you reckon, in the next 5 years? Uh, what will happen in the Philippines in the next 5 years in terms of solar?
Uh, I think it will continue to grow. Well, I'm looking at the policy of reaching 35% of the energy mix by 2030, and this is through the RPS. So there'll be a lot of displacement of fossil fuel on the grid. That's one. So it's more of a policy-driven, uh, let's say, market opening. But for customers getting installation, it also depends on the offers. As you mentioned, the business models and what the ESCOs can offer will push the market forward. So uh, it's the way I see the market moves is it's primarily driven by policy. So like the RPS right now, so it also allows the voluntary demand. I mean the the need of people to generate clean energy is also being supported by that policy. So it's a mix of what the policy allows you and what the market demands also is being presented on the market for the uh, providers.
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of policy dependency. Even during COVID in Australia last year, 2.5 gigawatt got installed uh, because the market incentivizes everyone to install solar. And of course, labor cost in Australia would have been much more expensive. As you know, Melbourne and Sydney, all those have been under lockdown. But in the Philippines, where labor would be cheaper, people would be technical. I still see a lot of policy dependency, no? That people are
Yes.
relying on a central government or a policy or someone else to do something, no?
Yeah, that's true, Sohail, because it's too risky to initiate some business models and suddenly government says that's not allowed, or they provide another program competing with what you're doing. So it's a risk. But if there's a clear path, like what what feed-in tariff did to this 500 or 800, or yeah, 500 plus megawatt installation, that's a policy-driven, let's say, incentive, and that actually spinned off the PV market in the Philippines. So net metering also allowed that installation, and RPS will be the next wave. So that's, I guess, the policy driven initiatives are still going to drive the market.
Like the land just behind you, uh,
Yes.
you mentioned earlier, if someone said, I just want to install solar, maybe I'll go for a low voltage DC, then do not have electric execution risk and things like that. Of course, DC cannot travel much longer or much further. What sort of permission will they need still to install, just as solar is electricity? Do they need permission? It's
No. that's that's if you're installing off grid,
Mhm,
just like buying a cell phone or
mhm.
buying an emergency unit, no permission is needed there, especially in areas without electricity. So what you see behind me are a few trees next to the systems you're going to install. It's it's a machine, but I also have these small lanterns that runs on 3.7 volts lithium batteries
Mhm.
that primarily provides power for lighting, and you can also charge your cell phone, and people can build systems around it. So it doesn't have to be high voltage or so to provide that energy service. It's just going to meet your lighting need, or powering a radio, or powering your mobile phone, or powering a fan. So that's all you need. It's as simple as that.
So the electricity in a box concept that we worked on, it's been almost 3, 4 years now. So that still has a huge market in the Philippines, you reckon? No?
Oh yes. But I would say it has to have uh, that capacity to build, to generate income, or at least to provide that services to be commercially viable. So we had been used to grants, and that had been fine in introducing technology, or even building confidence on the on solar, or even on the off-grid scheme. But somehow it has to develop into something commercial, that utilities themselves know the financial viability of it.
And
So the project I'm doing behind me is
mm,
something that will generate their income. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not talking about Asian Development Bank or IFC coming in and doing in a big way. I'm just talking about simply someone building a house and looking at the options, saying, okay, I can build diesel, and my evening use may be only lighting. Can I just not add into the cost of housing a small DC system, which will cover for fridges and other, maybe even with some batteries. So similar to the uh, electricity in a box that we worked on, no?
Yeah, there are two things. You mentioned, Suhil, about housing, and just another. So uh, we have a national program, or the Pag-ibig, or the housing national program, that you can take a housing loan for, let's say, 25 years. And
Mhm,
one developer I know, that they integrated solar in those houses,
mhm,
and then they combined it together, so that you're spreading the cost over
mhm,
time, and it becomes affordable. And these are houses already in the urban areas. So of course, those are 220-volt AC systems, but
mhm.
in the off-grid areas, it's difficult to apply for probably housing loan. depending on your location. Technology-wise, this low voltage technologies is quite available locally, and it becomes actually an option. It's just that often poor quality DC lights are available, so you need to source out good quality ones, and also the the sizing of the system has to be correct, because sometimes they're squeezing so much performance out of the equipment because it's relatively expensive. So but it's still still possible, the option is still there, and people are familiar with low voltage electricity, especially in the rural areas.
So there seem to be still that opportunity sitting there for someone to tap in, no?
Oh yes, there is that opportunity, uh, as long as you know your way around, because you could be competing with some other markets. Yeah.
What do you mean by some other market?
Because as I mentioned before, electrification had been the role of the utilities, even in off-grid. So when you start installing systems, suddenly national program gives away free solar home systems, and then your market is gone. That had happened globally. And my friends in South America, even some areas in Africa, they had been like commercially dealing with off-grid systems, and suddenly you have national government programs giving free systems. So people just wait for something free.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Silver. There are a lot of interesting thing happening, but still, I believe that um, the big thing for solar is still coming. It's
I
not
think
there
so.
yet.
I think so. It's not. We're not there yet. There are still a lot of opportunities. We're taking it up, step at a time. But I know, Suhil, you have big, bright ideas regarding solar, and I guess that will eventually happen. Often, you think ahead of your time. That's that's why
No, no, I mean,
it's not there yet.
I don't work in the Philippines anymore, as you know.
Yeah,
I
but
think that,
your great ideas are often ahead of their time. Yeah.
yes, I have to be quiet for a few years. Yes.
Yes.
And thank you very
Okay.
much,
Thank you
Silver.
too, and glad to uh, you know share my ideas with you.
And how does people find you?
I'm still on Facebook.
Okay.
um,
I
I
will
still have my
share,
email address.
yeah, I'll share all those details because I'm sure uh, some of my audience might be interested in the Philippine investments and things, and they might come and connect with you.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Silver.
Thank you too, Suhail.
Okay. See you.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our show. Also, leave your comments and review if you enjoyed today's episode. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at @shasni for updates. That's SHASNIE. Once again, this has been Energypreneurs, connecting you to the innovative opportunities in solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles. Stay tuned.